First of all, it is generally agreed that a strike only has meaning if it is situated in the field of labor struggles. The objective structure of power relations defined by the struggle between, on the one hand, workers, for whom a strike is the principal weapon, and on the other, employers with a third actor, which may not be one, the state. Phelps observes that there is no single labor market, but rather several labor markets, which have their own structures, by which he means the set of mechanisms that permanently govern the question of the different employment functions, recruitment, selection, job allocation, pay, and which, being based on law, contract, custom, or national policy, have as their main function to determine the rights and privileges of employees, and to bring regularity and predictability into labor management and everything that concerns labor. Isn't the historical tendency towards a gradual shift from local labor markets, in other words, fields of struggle, to a more integrated labor market? What are the factors of unification? We can distinguish economic factors and specifically political factors, namely the existence of an apparatus for mobilization, the trade unions. It has constantly been assumed here that there is a relationship between the unification of the economic mechanisms and the unification of the field of struggle, and also a relationship between the unification of the apparatus of struggle and the unification of the field of struggle. In fact, there is every reason to think that the nationalization of the economy favors the development of national apparatuses that are increasingly autonomous with respect to their local base, a development which favors the generalization of local conflicts. One of the major problems of the future could well be the mismatch between national character of union organizations and the international character of firms and the economy. But with respect to each state of the field, it is possible to ask how close it is, and to consider, for example, whether the real center of the existence of the working class is in the field or outside the field. The problem arises, for example, in the case of a working class world that is still strongly linked to the peasant world, to which it returns or in which it places its income, or a fortiori, in the case of a foreign subproletariat, as in Europe today. By contrast, the whole working class population may be sharply separated from the external world and have all its interests in the field of struggle. And again, variations can be found depending on whether that separation has occurred within that generation or over several generations. Seniority in entry into the field measures the duration of what might be called the process of operativization or factorization, if you'll accept that barbarous concept, forged along the lines of the notion of asylumization devised by Goffman to refer to the process whereby people in prisons, barracks, and all total institutions progressively adapt to the institution and, in a way, come to terms with it. By that, I mean the process through which workers appropriate their firm and are appropriated by it, appropriate their machinery and are appropriated by it, appropriate their working class traditions and are appropriated by them, appropriate their union and are appropriated by it, and so on. Several aspects can be distinguished within this process. The first, entirely negative, consists in the abandonment of external interests. These interests or stakes may be entirely real. One thinks of emigrant workers who send their money home to their families, buy land or farm equipment or shops back home. Or they may be imaginary with no less potent. This is the case with emigrant workers who, though having lost all real hope of returning home, remain in transit and so never become completely operativized. Finally, they may be integrated into the world of organized labor, losing in the realm of what might be called primary revolt, the often violent and unorganized revolt of peasants suddenly cast into the industrial world. and gaining in the realm of secondary organized revolt. Does trade unionism widen or narrow the range of demands? That is the question which this line of thinking leads to. The objective relations that define the field of struggle are apprehended in all the concrete interactions and not only in the workplace, and that is one of the bases of paternalism. Those are the terms in which one has to try to understand that. As Heinsohn suggests, the city seems more favorable to working class consciousness, whereas in a small entirely working class town, the growth of class consciousness is less rapid but more radical. The class structure as it is perceived at the local level seems to be an important mediation in understanding the strategies of the working class. There is a fundamental question that has not been fully brought out when we talk about the relationship between the state, the employers, and the workers. It is not entirely legitimate to contrast the objective reality of this relationship. Are the state and the workers interdependent or not? Are they allies, or does the state have an umpiring role? With the subjective reality from the point of view of the working class consciousness or false consciousness, the fact that the state is seen as autonomous, our state, our republic, is an objective factor. In the case of France, especially at certain times and in certain circumstances, the state is seen by the working class as independent and as a referee. Every recognition of the illegitimacy of certain means or certain ends does not weaken the struggle of the dominated, does not weaken the dominated. Economism, for example, is the strategy of the dominant. It consists in saying that the legitimate demand of the dominated is wages and nothing else. On that point, I refer you back to everything that Tilly said about the French employer's extraordinary interest in his authority, about the fact that he may give way on wages but will refuse to treat the dominated as acceptable partners in dialogue and communicates with them through posters on notice boards, etc. What is the definition of a legitimate demand? It is essential here, as Michel Perrault pointed out, to consider the structure of the system of demands, and you cannot study a demand such as a wage claim independently of the system, of other claims, working conditions, and so on. Similarly, you cannot study a means of struggle such as a strike independently of the system of the other means of struggle, if only to note in some cases that they are not used. The fact of thinking structurally brings out the importance of absences. The same analyses are valid for the definition of the legitimate means, strikes, sabotage, confinement of managers, etc. The unions are responsible for defining the right, correct strategy. Does that mean the most effective strategy in absolute terms with no holds barred? Or the one that is most effective because it is the most appropriate in the social context, implying a particular definition of the legitimate and the illegitimate? In the collective production of this definition of legitimate ends and means, of what, for example, constitutes a fair and reasonable strike or a wildcat strike, journalists and all the professional. The second mode is collective mobilization. This is the group assembling physically in the same place and manifesting its strength by its number. Hence the importance of the dispute over numbers. The police always say there were 10,000 demonstrators and the unions 20,000. Finally, there's delegation, the words of the union representative, speaking for perhaps 500,000 people. The second and third modes are not mutually exclusive. We need a comparative sociology and history of the modes and procedures of delegation. For the modes of designation of delegates and the characteristics of delegates. Delegate tends to be solidly built, serious-minded, respectable family man, with a mustache, with many years' service in the firm behind him, etc. Finally, we would need to consider the nature of the delegation.